Good day, good people. This is my thoughts, part two. Thoughts on the Black Republican. For years, it's been an enigma to me, the 10% or so of black people that vote Republican versus 90% or so of us that vote Democratic, Independent, or abstain from the process altogether. I always wondered what it was about the Republican Party that would warrant their strong support. In this age of Obama and a multicultural America, one would think that that 10% would drop somewhat, but the opposite effect seems to be taking place. I'm coming across more and more black people that strongly identify with today's conservative philosophies. I'm not really talking about the black Republican that votes so because he makes an excess of $300K a year and he's voting that way to get the best tax rate for the tax bracket that he falls in. I'm talking about the bougie Negro, the one that thinks that because they changed their party affiliation, they've arrived and are automatically better than the 90% of us that pay too much attention to the racial insensitivities of the party, to say nothing of their failed party leadership. They will argue that by becoming a Republican, they are morally correct, and the 90% of us that don't listen to AM radio all day are morally corrupt. By no means do I suggest to say that black people in this country should vote or think on monolithic terms. Not what I'm saying. What I am saying is, I expect any self-aware, self-respecting black man or woman to be cognizant, if not of the historical bigotry within their voting clique, the contemporary post-Obama bigotry that has gotten so blatant that even white Americans are beginning to question the mental capitulation of today's black Republican. The black Republican is as oxymoronic as a white Black Panther is in 1970, or equivalent to 10% of the Nation of Islam being Irish American. Can you imagine 10% of MS-13 being Hindu? Well, being a black Republican today defies that much logic. Black Republicans are a confused group of people, and you confuse yourself trying to understand the politics of the black Republican before understanding the psyche of the black Republican and understanding it from a historical perspective. The black Republican is older than the Republican Party itself, and what I mean by that is the 10% of people that identify themselves as Republicans, black people that identify themselves as Republican today, have a mentality and worldview consistent with the 10% or so who have historically sided with the power structure, no matter how detrimental they were to the other 90%. In fact, many of the 10% have at times been more detrimental to the people than the powers that be. When the transatlantic slave trade began, there were Africans that actually sold other Africans into bondage. There was not a lot of Africans doing this, just about 10% or so. During chattel slavery, there were black overseers that were whooping niggas' ass quicker and more brutally than the white slave master. Not a lot of black overseers, just about 10% or so. Then there's the 10% of proper-speaking light-skinned slaves that worked the house and enjoyed all the accoutrements that came with being a house slave versus the 90% of dark-skinned slaves that worked the field. I say all this to say that the 90-10 dichotomy as it relates to right-left politics in black America has less to do with the issues of the day and more to do with the way some of us are wired or programmed. Some of these black Republicans were born this way, and the black Republican in them was evident as early as the sandbox when they failed to learn how to share their toys. And then some of them were nurtured this way, either by their parents, media imagery, or for years of hating the black skin that they were so unfortunately born in. Either way, they're afflicted with what's called plantation psychosis. Plantation psychosis is what you would diagnose black folks that exert a slave-like mentality. Now, plantation psychosis is certainly not exclusive to the 10% because there are many in the 90% that still retain some of the ingrained traits from chattel slavery. We'll talk about field Negroes when I opine on BET, the BET Awards, Pig's Feet, or some other field Negro-related phenomenon. For now, we're going to focus on the 10% that thinks by virtue of them joining the grand old party they're the cream of the African-American crop. So now that we understand the mindset of the black Republican, we can more easily understand their political philosophy. In a nutshell, their political philosophy is whatever their former slave master's political philosophy is at the given moment. Now, I know that sounds harsh, and I'm sure all Republicans, whether black, white, or Bobby Jindal, will have an issue with what I'm saying. But they'll be hard-pressed to prove me wrong because the examples of the tomcoonery and tokenship are plenteous. It'll be far too easy for me to point to the ironic appointment of the first head of the GOP on the heels of the Democrats electing the first black president, or the fact that Rush Limbaugh has all but emasculated him to the base for thinking his appointment came with freedom of thought. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not going to talk about how he made him come on the air and apologize and reword his opinion of the de facto party boss for the listening pleasure of his 20 million rabid followers. I will instead recall an episode from the Glenn Beck sitcom. I was flipping through the channels and happened to catch Glenn's symposium on Black America with an all-black GOP audience and an all-black GOP panel. As I watched this modern-day minstrel show, I didn't know whether I should be laughing or if I should feel sorry for the dearth of critical thinking and intelligence displayed by Glenn's guests. Topic after topic, they allowed Glenn to frame every question or comment in a manner that pigeonholed all non-conservative black people as immoral, illiterate, or naive. According to them, you're either a responsible black Republican or an irresponsible black liberal, depending on the likes of Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton for direction. They wanted to co-sign each and every reasonless conclusion he arrived at and even offered a few of their own. From him questioning why we call ourselves African Americans as if that's his place, to him inferring that 90% of black America depends on government assistance. They nodded their head in agreement. At one point, he asked a young black conservative what were the root causes of high crime and high unemployment in the black community, and this dude goes into a diatribe on abortion. Now, everyone's entitled to their opinion on abortion, and I don't begrudge him for being against it, but what did it have to do with the topic of discussion? His keenest observation summarized the entire Glenn Beck Comedy Hour, and in fact, his retort to Glenn's query is a synopsis of how all black Republicans process and interpret data. If you know a black Republican, I implore you to take them to task and ask them why they're Republicans, and I assure you the answer you get from them will be a half-truth, a fallacious argument, whether it's a fallacy of division or fallacy of composition. And each and every opinion they arrive at will be devoid of empirical evidence to support the claim. Unless you suffer from plantation psychosis, you will leave the conversation scratching and shaking your head. They would say, for instance, that Abraham Lincoln was a Republican, and the Republicans ended slavery, blah, blah, blah. But what they won't say is the political disunion some 145 years ago was north-south and not left-right. Emancipation came as a result of the South being reactionaries and antiquated in their ideas of governance. Sort of how they are today. Then they'll say Martin Luther King was a Republican. You should vote because he was, blah, blah, blah. And again, they'll fail to mention the fact that the Democrats south of the Mason-Dixon line were called Dixiecrats. And the Dixiecrat Party platform ran parallel to Jim Crow law. So King being a Democrat in 1954 was sort of like a black man being a Republican today. Just defies logic. Furthermore, once LBJ signed the Civil Rights Bill to law, all of the Dixiecrats went to the Republican Party. So that making the Republican Party the anti-MLK party, particularly in the South. So in addition to these moonbats relying on ancient history and men that have been deceased for generations to make the case for why black people should vote Republican today, their points missed the mark and missed it badly. The same is true for their contemporary justifications for being house slaves. They don't make sense, and they don't have to, because it's the color of their skin that makes them a commodity and not the contents or lack thereof between their ears. Just proclaim themselves black Republicans and take a shot or two at the president, and they automatically qualify as subject matter experts on any subject, whether it's healthcare or constitutional law. If you have a black face and you're indifferent to Obama, in the minds of conservatives, you're a genius and deserve a pat on your head for changing your name to Toby. In closing, I just wanted to reiterate the fact that it's not about black people being monoliths. So the question has nothing to do with any kind of perceived loyalties that 10% has to the 90%. It's the realness and authenticity in question, along with the consistent rhetoric to reality deficit. To the black Republicans who might be watching, if you're able to stomach it this long, my words are out of love, you know what I'm saying? And my message to you is just keep it real. And by that, I don't mean the way you walk, the way you talk, or even who you vote for. Say that you are card-carrying members of the GOP, because blackface is the flavor of the moment, and it's a personal, not a collective benefit to being a black Republican today. If some of you come to grips with this reality, you will find it a lot easier to explain your choice of politics. I mean no offense, you know, it's just my thoughts. Peace.